Hello, and welcome to this eSchool Media webcast. My name's Andrew Barber. I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool Media, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by School Dude. And over the next hour or so, we'll be looking at strategies for successfully managing mobile devices in the school environment. Now, before I introduce our speaker and we dive into that discussion, let me just take a few moments to highlight a couple of items about the console we're using today. First, today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about taking notes or anything like that. In a couple of days, we'll send you all an email that will contain a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation slides from that same email. And second, please ask questions. Don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I hope we'll have 15 minutes maybe at the end when our speaker can answer your questions. We also have a chat function which you can launch via that blue group chat icon down at the bottom of your screen. I'd ask you to use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool Media team if you have any technical issues during the webinar or any other concerns for that matter. But I would ask a favor of everyone is please don't use the chat to ask our speaker questions. He simply isn't going to have time today to monitor the chat. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A panel instead. Now with that out of the way, let's get started. Over the next hour, I hope we'll take a look at the current landscape for mobile devices, their increasing use in instruction, and we're also going to look at some of the issues, both security and privacy related, that come with this new environment and how MDM can help with those. So without further ado, let me formally introduce today's speaker, Chris DeJuneas. Chris has been with School Dude for 2 years, working as an applications engineer. And as part of his job, he's responsible for demonstrating the product to IT and facilities professionals in education. His experience and knowledge help clients save money and time and help free up resources to run their operations and IT departments more efficiently. So welcome, Chris. It's a real pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We appreciate it. We always look forward to doing these events with you as well as interacting with any sort of educational organization representatives that we are constantly working with. So really do appreciate that. And I think we're going to go ahead and get started here by starting off with a poll question just to kind of lay out a little bit of what we're going to be talking about here. Since this is a constantly changing environment as it relates to mobile devices, let me go ahead and pull this up for us here first. We'd like to know a little bit more about what type of devices that you're actually using out there. So go ahead and fill that out for us. We'll give everybody a few seconds. We'll pull up the results and then we'll move on here shortly. But just to kind of give you a little bit of background on what we're going to be doing here today as you're filling that out, I would like to draw your attention in the lower left area of your console there. We've actually provided some resources for you here today. We're going to be looking at some of these different studies. That's where we get a lot of the different information that we use for the presentations that we make. So we're going to be starting off with the IDC Government Insights survey. That was actually performed last year. They do it every 2 years to give everybody a better picture of what's actually going on with the educational technology landscape and what type of spending's being done there and what type of trends they see. So we're going to start off with that here shortly. We're going to look at a few of those different metrics and numbers that came from that survey. After that, we're actually going to move over to the 2016 COSN IT Leadership Survey. That's going to give us a little bit of insight on what they're seeing as far as networks, in particular, the trends that they've seen over the past 3 years and the things that are really important to the IT leaderships in the educational environment. So did just want to draw your attention to those. Please feel free to utilize those links, check them out. And I do want to reiterate, just like Andrew mentioned at the beginning, please feel free to ask those questions. They're going to try to get those to me as well as we're going through. We want to keep this nice and relevant for you the whole time. So if those questions do pop up, get them in there. If we don't have time to answer them today, we will certainly come back and follow up with you at some point so we can get that taken care of. All right, so let's get started here. Just to reiterate again, my name is DeJuneas, one of the application specialists here at SchoolDude. I spend most of my days either here in my office doing webcasts, working with our sales, marketing, implementation teams. Do also get to travel the country. I'm fortunate enough to come work with some of you if you are existing SchoolDude users. I'm sure I've run into you at our user groups, other conferences around the country. I do also work with a lot of prospects and get to travel around, see what type of challenges you're having in the IT environment, see if there's anything we can help you with, but even if there's not something we can help you with, always looking for that opportunity to learn as much as possible about what you're doing so we can bring solutions to help you out. All right, so let's start off with some of these surveys that I was talking about here. Let's look at some of these metrics. This first one I was talking about, this is from the IDC 2015 Government Insight Survey. So you can see here, there's pretty straightforward themes that we're looking at. Technology is really here to stay as it relates to the classroom. I'm preaching to the choir there. That's not something I need to tell y'all. You see it firsthand every single day at your organizations. Interesting numbers here, though. 96% of teachers agree that technology is playing a significant role in their classrooms. I think we can safely say that's about 100%. What is very interesting is the proliferation of the open resource type material that we're seeing being used more and more. In a lot of places, it's being used instead of that physical textbook or even that digital version of that proprietary textbook. Technology in the classroom to deliver group instruction, that's not even specific to education. I mean, I'll tell you quite frankly here at the SchoolDude offices, whenever we have large meetings, whether it's the sales department, marketing teams, we use mobile apps to do polls and ask questions in real time when we're doing those meetings. So I know that y'all are also doing that sort of thing in that educational environment. So that's something we're seeing outside of just education, but really making its way throughout all different markets when you have the on-demand responsiveness from the technology like we see. And then to communicate with parents, obviously, that one's been around since even when I was in school, so I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. We're giving them more access than we ever have before to some of these technology tools, whether it's a way to check on their grades, communicate directly with the instructor or the teacher. We even have a mobile safety app that we're putting right there in parents' hands so they're keeping abreast of what's going on within that classroom, within the school, even as it relates to student safety. So this isn't even just specific to that IT realm, obviously. All right, so obviously the message here, technology's here. We're using it throughout all of education. So what that means to me is a lot of money being spent in this realm. And you can see from those numbers, this is a significant amount of money being spent in the educational IT industry across really all education verticals, whether it's public K through 12, higher ed, private and independent schools obviously as well. $6.6 billion projected in IT and higher education. That is staggering when you start looking at those numbers. Higher ed does seem to be the early adopters when it comes to a lot of the IT infrastructure that we see. A lot of those surveys that we've looked into, it seems like higher ed is obviously investing in the infrastructure, the network side of things, quicker and quicker. Because let's face it, for a long time, probably longer than most K through 12, higher ed's been allowing faculty members, teachers, students, professors, anybody and everybody to bring their own devices and still having a way to support that. So I think that's why you see a little bit of that higher spend already occurring in higher ed. But as you bring that down and look at it across K through 12, they're not far behind. $4.7 billion. A lot of that, again, we've brought the technology into the classroom. Everybody's got their hands on a device, heck, maybe even 2 or 3 devices, depending on if we're talking about a faculty member there. Some of them issued out by the school. Some of them are bringing their own devices. So we're really seeing that all across education. And then when you look at it on laptops alone, $3.7 billion. We're going to get into this a little more here. We're going to get specific into what devices are being used most commonly, at least as far as what we see. But you can see the difference between laptops and tablets / mobile. Obviously, that line's kind of being erased as well. But that tablet and mobile, it's moving up a little bit, but it's a lot of the tablet growth we've seen kind of stagnate, and we'll get more into that here in a little bit. So moving on to the COSN side of the survey that we were looking at, and that's the Consortium of School Network Professionals. If anybody's not familiar with it, definitely worth checking out the work they do. They actually just released another survey here earlier this week with a little bit of a different focus, but definitely a group to check out if you have not already. They also do great events around the country if you're looking to network with some other IT professionals out there. But here's some of the interesting information they have found through their surveys. And just to give you a little bit more background on the surveys that they're performing, they're typically looking at IT professionals. The last one they did with this particular survey, just under 600 responses from IT directors in 47 states, all different size schools that they're surveying when they look out there and do their surveys. Anywhere from very small school districts with a couple hundred all the way up to very large school districts with 30, 40,000 students in them. So let's look at some of these trends that we can see here. Pretty interesting stuff. In 2013, when a lot more people were concerned with the BYOD phenomenon we were seeing, right? Assessment readiness, that's something that's always going to be kind of top of mind because, let's face it, that's what we're in the business of doing, is educating students. So the assessment was always interesting. But broadband access, we see it at number 3 there, and then we see it move on up to the top this year. And a lot of that has to do with what we were just mentioning. We've brought all of the devices into the schools. We've figured out ways that students and faculty members can bring their own devices, but now we have to support all of those bandwidth needs. So that's why we've seen broadband and network capacity constantly creep up there. COSN is doing some interesting work with helping to provide guidelines for educational organizations on what sort of networking speed should you be aiming for the long term as well as short term. The report that they just released here this week deals a lot more with that. I would recommend you checking it out and asking yourself the question, are we going to meet what COSN and the FCC and some of the other people out there are suggesting for the minimum network speeds for our students? For that 10-year long-term plan, do we have a plan in place to get to that 1 gigabyte per student that they're suggesting we should be at? Something we need to consider, because we're going to see the needs and the demands on our network continue to increase, not only from people bringing their own devices, but as we roll more and more of this new technology out into our educational organizations. So let's take it in there a bit further there. We're going to talk specifically about the educational materials that you see there. Almost all of respondents say they expect their instructional materials to be at least 50% digital in the next 3 years. That's probably going to happen a lot quicker than they realize, especially when you start realizing how much more affordable and how much you can save by going that digital route with a lot of these resources. They're not having to be reprinted. If you come out with a new edition, it can be updated on the fly without having to go out and purchase, getting locked into all of these different licensing agreements and so forth. So this is something, again, that just hits on the fact that the technology is here to stay. The environment is evolving, and how we're delivering these content to our students is certainly evolving along the way as well. And this is always an interesting topic to bring up. It's one of a lot of philosophical discussion, but when you start talking about BYOD, bringing your own device, bringing your own technology into this school, into that educational organization, whether it's higher ed, heck, we have a lot younger students bringing devices in now. Just a few years ago, this was considered a big no-no. We weren't letting anybody do this. Big security risk, privacy risks, personal information getting out, things like that. So we just had pretty much a blanket ban on bring your own device type of policies. That is absolutely not the case, and that has changed very quickly. So you can see only 11% even have a ban in place currently. If you would have looked at that a few years ago, you would have been looking at over 75% because there's a few reasons. One, we didn't know what we didn't know, right? We didn't know that there's actually a lot of benefits to come from BYOD, and we're going to be talking about that here shortly. But the other side of things is we just weren't equipped to handle it. We didn't have the tools in place. We didn't have the expertise in place. We didn't have any platforms that could help us do this without overwhelming ourselves with all of these devices. So what we're going to do here, get a little more specific into that BYOD side of things, because we've found some interesting stats from people that we work with, some things to kind of look out for, the pitfalls, but also some unexpected gains that a lot of our educational clients have also noticed by really embracing these BYOD policies. So we'll look at the pros, we'll look at the cons. After that, I'm also going to share out my screen with you, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a tour of our platform so you can get a good idea of how we can take some of these items I'm about to show you and bring them into the real world and show you an actual application of a lot of these ideas here. So let's drill a little bit more into that BYOD world. Let me see what sort of Q&A that we have going on here. Gotcha. Okay, thank you for pointing out that IDC survey. Our link does not work. We're going to get that fixed out for you. So anybody that wants to can also check that out. All right, so let's talk about these BYODs here. All right, so I like to always start with this whole concept of mobile devices and, really what are they? A few years ago, it was a lot easier to define what a mobile device was, right? There wasn't really many choices out there. We were still in the pretty traditional form factor era. You've got a desktop, you've got a laptop, tablet, mobile phone. Pretty straightforward, but that's absolutely changing now as these manufacturers start building the components for mobile devices into that traditional form factor of a laptop. I mean, that's pretty much what we're talking about as far as a Chromebook is concerned there. The operating system is a lot more similar to what you would find in a mobile device compared to a traditional laptop. They just put it in a traditional laptop or a traditional form factor type of presentation there. And I think we're going to get in a little bit more into that, why we think they decided to go that route and why they're seeing the success that they are. I mean, look at that. In 2016, Chromebooks, 50% of the market share for new sales. Okay, if we went back to 2010, what percent of the market were they even at? How many people even knew that Google was even rolling out hardware, let alone what a Chromebook was? So to see them grab that market share in the short time period that they have is really a testament to this changing IT environment that we're constantly having to deal with. And it's also one of those things that can make BYOD management tough because you don't even know what device people are going to be showing up with within the next few months. It may be something really cool we don't even know about yet. So obviously Google's really come on strong. They're taking a lot of that market share, but let's look at the historically big players that we've seen in this area. Apple, they've been trying to reinvent themselves a bit in the educational space, especially with that mobile device management. They've been building MDM capabilities into their devices for a long time, maybe as long as anybody's been doing it actually, but they really never made that big push into the educational operations space until recently. We hear people talking about Apple School Manager, Apple Classroom. They don't exactly seem completely solidified on where they're going to be heading with it. Some really good ideas there that seem like they're still being baked out. And I think that's a reason you're seeing that share fall a bit, down to only about a quarter of the market. I think you may see that tick back up as you get more and more people adopting the programs we were just talking about there, the Apple School Manager, the Apple Classroom. If they can really get on solid ground with those programs and get people using them, I think you'll see that tick back up. But the reality of the situation is right now, it's probably the most expensive of the three different manufactured devices that we're talking about here. Those Windows machines, really seeing those come back on strong. We've always used Windows machines very heavily in the educational space. But you're seeing that now make a comeback, especially with the Windows 10 push and trying to get everybody on that uniform operating system type of platform there. I think you're going to see Apple starting to move that route as they try to merge iOS with OS X as more of a Mac OS in the future, kind of following in Windows footsteps there, which is interesting because for the past few years we've kind of seen it the other way around. But now Windows is in a very good space with their mobile capabilities there. So again, this just sits in the fact that these devices are here to stay. We're going to see them evolve. We're going to see them change up a bit, but we've got them in the classroom for sure. Now, I mentioned it's interesting that we see Chromebooks hitting that market share like they are, and Apple kind of remaining stagnant. Obviously, part of that is going to be due to the cost, that barrier of entry getting in there to actually start using those. But I think one of the reasons that you're also going to see a lot of that stagnation is simply the form factor of that device alone. iPads are used very heavily in your younger grades. K through 2, K through 3, and sometimes 4. You're seeing a lot of iPad usage there. You can lock down those devices very easily to where there's only so much that user can do. But also, it's very visually based. You've got the visual basis. You're touching things. You're really developing a lot of those motor skills along the way with some of the interesting educational interactive apps that they have there. As you start getting older, what happens? You start seeing that market share change, right? Now all of a sudden is when you see those Chromebooks really starting to outpace the iPads, not as much the Windows machines, but absolutely those iPads. Reason being is we need a keyboard, right? If we're going to be in the real world, if we're going to be out in the actual workplace doing things, if we're going to be preparing for secondary or post-secondary education, we better know how to use those devices. So that's where we see a lot of the changeover happen, and the reason we're seeing a changeover is specifically because of that keyboard implementation. There's a lot of different keyboard options out there for iPads, but a lot of them haven't caught on. They're just not really well designed. They don't give people that very solid platform that we're used to having with most standard keyboards there. So very interesting things here. Be interested to see if y'all have seen a lot of this as well. If y'all get into that conversation going in the chat there, I'd love to review that later as well. All right, so moving on a bit, we've looked at some nice stats to kind of get the groundwork laid here for what we're seeing within the educational technology market, what devices we're seeing. You can see here from a lot of these different numbers, when you start allowing these devices onto the campus, whether they're district-owned, you're allowing BYOD, we've got that security threat. It's always at the top of the mind with pretty much everything that we do nowadays. That's really one of the things that's driven a lot of people to move over to a mobile device management type of platform. The ability to have more of a uniformed way to manage these devices, regardless of what type of device it is, to be able to put some basic security measures in place, whether you're setting up proxies, whether you're filtering web traffic, or if you're just locking it down to where they can only access Wi-Fi from that device. These are all things that just a few years ago were not possible. Now that we have mobile device management platforms, we can address these security and privacy issues a lot more efficiently without spending all of our time having to touch these devices. So let's get a little more specific now. Let's talk about the mobile device management platforms here and the differences between some of them and some of the things to look out for, but also maybe some of the challenges that we're going to run into as we're evaluating different platforms, trying them out. Maybe we've come on board with some in the past and they haven't worked so great. So security is that first one. We just looked at some of those different numbers related to security. It's always at the top of everybody's mind right now. The burden on the IT is very real. If you're allowing your users to bring their own devices, your employees or your IT department now has to be very knowledgeable about those different devices. If they do not have a mobile device management platform in place, you're going to have to know your way around the different operating systems. You're going to have to know different features and different capabilities that may or may not be in the different devices that you have out there. Like I mentioned, we don't know what device is going to turn up on campus if we have a BYOD. Again, it may be something really cool we've never even seen before. All right, so by having a platform that supports multiple types of devices, you're going to be more prepared and you're going to lower that burden on your IT department because they're going to easily be able to manage it through that platform with those different features in place. And, you know, even if you're not allowing your students yet, pretty much all organizations are allowing those IT or employee-owned devices to come in there through the IT department and get connected to the network. So I'll show you a few options there when we share out the screen and we look at the platform for how we can very easily help manage even those faculty devices. Here's some more metrics from that COSN survey. This just drives home the fact that BYOD programs are here to stay. So we're not even relying on district-owned technology specifically, which is also a good and bad thing. There can be pluses and minuses for something like that. But you can see here, 78% of elementary school students are using a tablet. And then you see the number drop, right? This is what we were just talking about as far as trends are concerned. 69% of middle school students using a tablet. Once we get to high school, we see less than half of the students out there regularly using a tablet. You're just not going to use that type of device in a learning environment in high school where you're relying on word processing tools, spreadsheets, building presentations, and even doing some light computer science type of education that we're seeing with a lot of the STEM programs nowadays. So you can see that trend really is laid out there for you very well, especially when you get to the end there and you see, you know, almost 90% are using laptops in school. Again, it just makes a lot of sense. And I mentioned there's also, there were some unexpected pros and wins from BYOD type of programs, things people didn't expect to see when they rolled out a platform like that, but saving money, significant money savings. If you don't have to go with a district-wide program in which you're rolling out devices as a one-on-one through a district purchase or an E-rate or anything like that, it's going to save you money up front. No doubt about it. If you don't have to lock into buying those devices, leasing those devices, I know there's a lot of different ways to do that right now. But also touching on the time savings, we also mentioned there a little bit. But with the time savings, it really is just such a headache to try to have to learn your way around all of these different devices and what they can do and what they can't do. One of my favorite features with most mobile device management platforms out there is the ability to tie the Wi-Fi to the actual profile. And this is something we'll talk more about when I show you our platform here, but how many people get those basic questions about just passwords, not remembering the Wi-Fi password, resetting passwords, that type of thing? Well, with the solid MDM platform, pretty much any of them that are out there, you're going to be able to tie your Wi-Fi access to the profile that you push out to the device. That way you never actually have to share the password with anybody. They can't leak it if they don't know it. You don't have to reset it for them or give it to them again if you never did it in the first place. So just something to consider there. And then the increased IT reputation and user happiness. Let's face it, we're all more happy when we get to use our own devices. I mentioned earlier, I travel the country a good bit, doing either on-site presentations for prospects. We also travel the country going into conferences and trade shows. Just this past weekend into this week, I was up in Wisconsin presenting, and they want you to use their computer. Well, I kind of understand the idea there, but I don't know your computer, and I've got everything saved on mine along with my shortcuts so I can easily navigate through what I'm doing. So, throw them a bone. Give them the ability to bring their own device. It's going to increase their happiness. If you have the tools in place to accommodate that, it's really no skin off your back, and you look like a hero as opposed to always being the bad guy, which is kind of, unfortunately, that role we get used to playing in the IT world a lot of times. So think about rolling out something like that to allow them to use that device they're comfortable with. Now, all of a sudden, kind of building that positive energy. All right, so let's get a little more specific here into the profile management side of things. And let me see if we had any questions there that we've been having coming in. Yes, we will be sending out copies of the video. Andrew mentioned that we'll be linking that out for you. So do not worry. You're not going to have to take any notes. We'll get this to you once we're done here. All right, so profile management. Pretty much across the board, the way mobile device management platforms work, you have to push a profile out to the device. That's actually how we track the device. That's how we manage the device. You can't do it with a basic network scan because what happens if I put my mobile device in cellular mode? Well, I'm going to have a hard time picking that up if I'm scanning my network since I cannot scan cellular networks. I believe that's reserved for the NSA currently. So we're not in on that program, unfortunately, but we can still manage and track that mobile device by simply pushing a profile out to it. Now, once you get that profile onto a device, you're going to see it enrolled into your platform. That's when you can start doing the really cool things like locking out cameras. Maybe you want to lock it down into something called kiosk mode, where the user can only access one single app that you have predetermined. So a lot of really cool things are enabled once you push that profile out to that device. A lot of people right now, I know, if you are using Apple Configurator, if you're doing iPad management or iPhone management, a lot of people are out there still using the physical connection, plugging that USB cord in there, and I get it. I've been in that world. I've had to do it before. It becomes a lot more efficient when you don't have to touch every single device and you can wirelessly push out a profile to it, and you don't have to actually connect it to Configurator before installing that profile or pushing out apps. Speaking of apps, that's the other great part about an MDM platform. If you have an MDM platform that integrates with Apple's volume purchasing program, if you've been purchasing applications for your district, you have the ability to push those out right to the devices, lock down the different configurations like we talked about, cameras, content ratings. If you're going to have different carts of elementary school iPads versus high school iPads and so forth, well, you're probably going to have different content rating for the apps that you want to make available for those different groups. So being able to set up different profiles for different devices, something you definitely want to be on the lookout for. since you're probably not going to go with one just blanket managed approach there. Going to have little caveats here and there. One of the things that we do get asked questions about, when you allow BYOD, if you install a profile on the device, you probably need to let that profile be removed since the district does not own that device. And one of the ones we get asked about is, are parents going to want these profiles on the devices? And overwhelmingly, we've seen the response is yes, because one of the first things that you push out as part of that policy is going to be filtering of internet traffic. Most parents like that you have something to filter that internet traffic on that device even when they're at home. So at bare minimum, if you're pushing out a profile that's got a proxy, filtering out certain content, there you go. Now you've just done the parents a favor too. We mentioned the Wi-Fi capabilities. As much fun as you have trying to make sure passwords don't leak out or reset them or anything like that. And then web clips. I think this is a very underutilized area of the mobile device world anyway. Web clips just allow you to have custom icons embedded there right on the home screen. If you want to give access to quick profile installation for somebody that brings their own device, this is a great way to do it. So if they delete that profile when they leave school and go home for the weekend, they can delete that profile right off, and upon coming back to campus, just click that icon right on the desktop or right on the home page there, and it's going to reinstall that profile within seconds, so they're now ready to go. Extremely effective if you tie their Wi-Fi access to that profile like we mentioned there earlier. Now they have a really good incentive to get back on that network, so they got to reinstall the profile to do it, thus putting your security and privacy measures right back in place there. Now, I did mention Apple's VPP. Also worth mentioning Apple's device enrollment program. I know a lot of people out there in the educational marketplace are certainly using the device enrollment program. We refer to it as the DEP. But this gives you the ability to do purchases through Apple and have those devices preloaded with your MDM profile. So you don't have to sit there and go through the installation of it before you get that device into the user's hands. If you're using the DEP, not only do you have the ability to preload it, but you can also determine what those setup steps should look like. So if you don't want the user tying an Apple ID to it, if you don't want them setting up certain aspects of that device, if you don't want them turning Siri on, you can delete those particular items from that setup menu so they don't even get a chance to do it. The volume purchasing program, it's another Apple-sponsored program. The VPP allows you to do bulk purchases of license for any sort of applications, ebooks, things like that you're going to want to push out to your faculty members, for example. So if you've just bought a bunch of licenses, in the past, what you would have to do is typically reimburse the teacher if they put that on their own card. I've worked with educators who distribute out Apple gift certificates so that the teacher can just purchase whatever they tell them to with that gift certificate. Apple's kind of redoing how they're doing the licensing right now because they've gotten themselves in trouble. I'm sure a lot of you right now are probably shaking your head if you've had to experience trying to reset a device with an Apple ID from a teacher or faculty member who's no longer at the organization. That is a boatload of fun, trying to get a hold of Apple and get them to help you out when you're not the actual owner of the Apple ID, but are the owner of the device. So something we're seeing Apple revamp there is actually allowing you to push licenses from the VPP directly to a device, bypassing a user having to even pair that up with their Apple ID at all. So that's a nice change. It's been a long time coming for them. And something else we're seeing them recommend is actually rolling up all of your different VPP accounts into one. I know that is a big change for a lot of people. A lot of times larger organizations, you may have a different VPP account for each campus or each facility on your campus. If they control their own budget, you want them taking care of their own apps, purchases, and licensing. Apple's actually suggesting moving away from that, especially if you want to start using Apple School Manager and Apple Classroom. They're going to make you actually roll up those accounts as part of the process. So something to keep on your radar there and something to be aware of as you're going through that process. And then finally, obviously, choose an established MDM partner. There's a ton of them out there. You'll see a list that Apple provides of ones they work with. Make sure that they do integrate with that device enrollment program along with that volume purchasing program so that you are actually getting what you should be out of there and able to use those other programs that they do give you access to. All right, so what I'm going to do here for the last few minutes, before we jump into any sort of Q&A, let me go ahead and share out my screen with you. So bear with me here, and you're going to see your screen changing in just a second with me. And I'm going to go ahead and walk you through what our platform looks like, ask any questions that you may see as it's coming out. Again, I don't want this to be too focused specifically on us and more about the environment in general, so please feel free to ask questions there. So 1 second, and this is going to share out the screens with everybody. And you're going to see yours changing in just a second with me here as I log into our platform. And I'm going to give this a second to catch up since I know there's a little bit of lag on it there. All right, so here we go. What we're looking at here is actually the newest platform that SchoolDude has rolled out. It's called Technology Essentials, and the whole idea here is over the next few months, we are going to be completely rolling out a completely revamped IT suite that's going to include the ability for you to have your tickets, asset discovery, and your mobile devices managed all under one roof. So we've rolled out the asset discovery and the mobile device management portions of it so far. The mobile device management side of things right now is limited to iOS as far as management's concerned. We can also query OS X devices, so if you need to track those around, see what sort of apps you have on them, we can do that. Within the next few weeks, we're going to be rolling out Android support, and then a little further out into 2017, the roadmap's looking for Chromebooks, as well as Windows support there as well. So we will be adding a lot of functionality to this platform over the next few months, so I'll walk you through what we have for the iOS version, and you can see what we have going on. So first things first, I did mention the volume purchasing program and the device enrollment program. So I'm going to take you to our admin menu here in the upper right. And when we go over to our MDM administration, this is actually where you'll get synced up. So first and foremost, you'll generate your push certificate through Apple. This is what allows SchoolDude to be your mobile device management server. Once you get this generated, you'll activate your certificate. All you have to do is pair this up with your primary Apple ID. Takes about 20 minutes to go through that process, and then you're up and running. You're ready to start managing devices just like that. Now, if you do want to sync up with your DEP account or your volume purchasing account, those are done right here as well. So you'll see the DEP as well as the VPP. Get those synced up. Now you can start utilizing the best of both of those programs and their features right through this one platform. Now I'm going to go to our MDM tab. You'll see it here in the top. And what we're looking at currently is a list of the different devices that I have enrolled in this program. Now I know a few of you are probably wondering, how do I actually go about getting my devices enrolled? There's a lot of different options actually. The easiest option is going to be to use that Apple device enrollment program. Remember, if they're district-owned devices that you've purchased through there, you can have them come preloaded with that profile configured, or you can push out that profile through the DEP. So that's obviously going to be the easiest option, but if you're not using the DEP, or if you have devices that are already out there in use, you could send an email that contains a link for that profile installation. You can send that to one person's email address, and they can install it on however many devices you need to. You can install an individual link to each individual device if it's already out there in the user's hands. The other option, think about airdropping the profile. If they're all iPads and you're on the same network or you have some iPhones in there, the quickest way is just going to be to airdrop that profile from device to device to get it installed without having to check an email. And then the last option, if those of you out there still using Configurator, if you need to plug these devices in one more time using that USB cord, you can certainly push the profile out to Apple Configurator as well. Now, whichever one of those options you end up taking, once that profile is installed on the device, that's when you're going to see the device appear in your menu here. If you need to get some basic information about the device, you click on the pencil here, and it's going to show you those tech specs and those details that you're interested in. So here we can see location information based off of IP mapping. Simply set up a list of your locations and buildings paired up with the correct subnet. We capture the IP address. We can allocate it to the correct location, obviously. You can do some owner assignment here. If you're assigning these devices out to an owner, you can certainly indicate who it is that you've assigned it to. If it's a BYOD device, you can indicate that it is employee-owned as well. You're going to see the last time information was collected. You're going to see if this is a supervised device or not. If you're using the DEP, you're probably already aware of those supervised features. You get some extra features through the mobile device management platforms if your devices are supervised. Below this, you'll see the hardware details. We're picking up model, version. We're going to show you the serial. We're going to show you battery and memory capacity on the device itself. Here's some of that IP address information, MAC address, networking details. You can also import financial information here if you already have it paired up in a spreadsheet, for example. And then up across the top, we can also get a high-level look at the different applications that we have on this particular device here as well. If we need to drill in and get details, we can click on that pencil icon, learn more about that particular app, see if it's managed or not as well. You also have the ability to build out your applications catalog here. You're going to want to have one that's integrated with the iTunes Store. I can search for any apps, select it, and then hit my Add to Catalog button at the bottom, and that's going to build out an applications catalog that I can then push out to devices as what are called approved apps. We give you the ability to push out an approved app store as part of this process. If you are utilizing the VPP, here's your different licensing options. Some people are still using the old school redeemable VPP codes. You can certainly import those in here if you need to use those up. Otherwise, if you've moved on to managed distribution, I mentioned earlier, you can push a license directly out to a device without having to push it to a user first. Definitely something you want to keep in mind. It's going to make your life a lot easier in the long run as well. All right, so we've got our devices enrolled. We've built out our applications catalog. We've paired this up with the volume purchasing program licenses if we need to push them out to a device. Now we can actually go into our management controls. Two different options here. We've got a very easy to use wizard-based approach for you. So if you need to create some new policies for your devices, start off here. We're going to walk you through a very basic process. So if I need to create a new policy, let's say I need to do something for my elementary school carts maybe. So we'll make our elementary school profile here. Next, we'll select what devices we need to push this out to. After that, here's our different profile restrictions. So if I need to set up a new profile for my specific devices, hit New. And in the left column, you're going to see all of the different payloads that Apple gives us access to. Now, this is going to look pretty similar across most mobile device management platforms because you know how Apple is. They only give us access to what they decide they're going to give us access to. A little different than Android, who likes to open everything up for us. So Apple locks us down to just these payloads. Now, some of the ones that I had pointed out when we were going through the presentation, I'll also show you where they live here. Probably the most common is the restrictions. You have a lot of different options for locking down things like native functionality and native application use. All right, so you can see here things like allowing the installation of apps. Things like allowing screen capture. Probably don't want to allow that in the classroom. Probably don't want to allow the camera. Don't want to be asking Siri the answers to questions. Native applications like YouTube, the iTunes Store, Safari can all be locked down here. We've been talking a lot about security and privacy concerns, so you do also have the ability to drill down and lock down your different security and privacy ratings within the platform here. You'll see you've got them for movies, TV shows, and apps. Or you can go with the blanket, do not allow any explicit content. That's what I was talking about at a bare minimum for BYOD programs. Just go with not allowing any explicit content. Tie your Wi-Fi access to it. Most parents probably aren't even going to mind that you put a profile on that device because all it's doing is keeping their children safe from some of that crazy internet traffic they may be seeing. Some of the other ones we mentioned, that Wi-Fi access here, you do have the Wi-Fi payload you can configure. If you want to tie this to a hidden network, we can do so. We can also tie the password here right into the profile. Now I don't have to tell anybody the password because it lives on the profile itself. If it's not on the device, this device will not connect to my hidden network as a result. And then the other one I mentioned there, App Lock, or kiosk mode as some people call it. If I want to limit this iPad to only be used with the application that I determine, very simple. I've got a list of the different apps that are on this device right here. If I want to lock it down to only be used for this one, I can even lock down the ability to navigate through anything else. Right, so those are all just some different payloads, some of the ones that we see used more commonly. After you select your different profile configuration options, here's your app catalog. So you can scroll through here, push out whatever apps you want to directly to the device or to that approved app store like I mentioned as well. Lastly, you just review your changes before hitting save and apply, and that's what's going to push this out to that device. Now later on, you're probably not going to want to come through and touch each and every one of these different wizard steps. That's where advanced configuration comes into play. You can drill directly into device, application, or profile groups from here. So if I need to see very quickly what applications I've pushed out to my faculty members, it's like editing security groups if you have any experience with that. So it's very easy for me to see what I've got out there. I can also add or remove something right from my application catalog if I need to on the fly without going through every step of that configuration wizard. And then finally, if I needed to quickly drill into a profile, maybe I forgot to remove the cameras for testing this week, and I don't want the cameras on those devices. I don't want anybody grabbing pictures or screen grab or anything like that. So here I can actually drill in very quickly and say, all right, let's go into this particular profile here, and I need to go into my restrictions. All right, so from here, I'm actually going to minimize this for you a bit. I'm going to pull up my mobile device. Everybody should see that mobile device popping up with me. And I'll show you how quick and easy this is. If I want to lock down the camera there that you see in the upper right, I'm going to remove the use of the camera. I'm going to hit save at the bottom. It's going to ask me if I'd like to apply it. And I'm going to say yes. And just like that, you see that camera is no longer in the upper right. Now I'm going to go back in here because I guarantee you I'm going to see something really cool later, and I'm not going to be able to take a picture of it. So I'm going to go ahead and add that camera back on there really quickly if I need to. Now, what else is nice about this, I'm going to go ahead and maximize this back out for us. What else is nice with this is going to be the ability for us to push out that approved app store. I'll pull that up for you there. That's the shopping basket that you see. So if you want to push out just a list of approved apps that you want your users to be able to download, that's what it looks like right here. We can have all of those different apps in a store for them. If they need to install it, whenever they have the time to do so, they can look through the different catalogs, look through your list, and see what it is that they would like to install on that device. Now, you can certainly push these installations right out to the devices as well. If it's a supervised device, it's going to install it automatically. If this is not a supervised device, it's going to ask us if we would like to install that particular app. To do something like that, you just come back to your device list. You're going to right-click on the device that you'd like to control, and you're going to see a device actions options. We can do a lot of different things from here. If we need to wipe out passcodes, students think it's funny to add a passcode to a device before they turn it back in. Well, it's really not hard to get past that with a platform like this. If we need to erase that device, we need to wipe it if it's gone missing, we can do so. We can also flush the apps that we've pushed out there. We can install an app on demand if we need to. We can also lock this device down. Right, so if I want to access this my app catalog very quickly, I can say install app. Scroll through and see what it is that I would like to install. Let's say we're pushing out Audible here. And install selected, confirm my selection, and it's going to push it out. There you can see, just like that, it's asking me if I would like to approve that. So if I hit cancel, it's going to be added to my approved store. Otherwise, it's going to install it right there on demand. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what the platform looks like and how it can function. Very similar across most mobile device management platforms, again, as far as Apple is concerned, because they only give us access to what they give us access to. Let me go ahead and stop this now, bring it back into our presentation. Bear with me for 1 second. And any other questions that have popped up, please feel free to get those in here. And we do have one more question for you before we wrap it up, so I'm going to go ahead and push this out to us. So I'm going to load that up. We've got the poll coming up for you. And as we do that, I'm also going to pop open the Q&A, see if there's anything in there, and also invite Andrew back on to see if he's seen any questions that he can feed my way. So get those in there. We've got a few more minutes here, about 10 minutes we can spend with you answering questions. So keep them coming.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much, Chris. While we wait for people to take an answer there, to answer this poll question, I just want to remind everyone, I did post in both the Q&A and in the group chat the URL that we have listed in the resource list there for IDC Government Insights was incorrect. So I posted the correct URL in the group chat and in the Q&A as well. So I apologize for that, but the URL is there now for you. Chris, and we'll get to the questions as soon as you walk us through this poll. So back to you.
All right, outstanding. So everybody should see the poll there. Let me go ahead and move on from that. I do also want to pull up a list of some resources here. I'm going to pull up some resources for us. So if anybody does have any additional questions on top of the IDC government survey and the 2016 COSN survey, if you did want more information about anything that we've talked about today, DEP, VPP, there's some more links that you can see for those other programs that we were talking about as well. All right, and let's see here as far as the questions are concerned. All right, so is it possible to create different profiles for different schools? Absolutely. That's one of the best reasons to come on board with a mobile device management platform. You're going to have different needs for your different facilities, your different grades, and your different devices as well. So yes, absolutely, you can create different profiles. They can have a whole different combinations of apps and restrictions to go along with that as well.
All right. Chris, one question which I wanted to ask that came in from someone in the audience was a question about antivirus and whether MDM makes sure the devices are safe to be on the school's network. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to be taken care of on your network settings there. But yeah, you can absolutely filter out to where certain content's not going to be accessible, especially certain websites. You can blacklist and whitelist certain things from there. So it's not going to be a specific antivirus type of approach like you're probably used to seeing for workstations, but it can certainly help you out in protecting yourself against a lot of those types of threats.
Okay. All right. And a follow-up from the very same person in the audience, talking about which devices SchoolDude serves. There was quite a lot of discussion about Apple in your presentation. Does SchoolDude also manage Windows machines, and what else does it handle?
Yeah, great question. So a few months ago, about 5 months ago, we rolled out the initial version of the mobile device management platform. It is iOS focused with OS X capabilities in there as well. That's what we ran through there today. Within the next few weeks, we're bringing out Android management capabilities. After that, we're looking at adding Chromebook and then Windows to kind of give you an idea of what the roadmap looks like for us. So over the course of this winter, Android support will be added, and then the Chromebook and Windows are a little further out on the roadmap there.
Okay. And what about Kindle Fires? Any word on that?
I'd have to check on Kindle Fire specifically. I haven't done much testing with them, but that's something we can certainly take a note on here and follow up about. Great question.
Okay. And the same audience member wants to also ask about something called Whispercast with Amazon. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard a little bit about it. I don't have a ton of knowledge, so I don't want to say. I'm not sure if there's anything specific they were wondering about, or if they were just, bringing it up to our attention. But yeah, it's something I saw that there, and I plan on adding it and looking more into it and see what's going on with that.
Okay. All right. Terrific. And one question I had, this didn't come from the audience, this is coming straight from me. You talked about this sort of move to BYOD and how it can be very advantageous to schools. As you travel around to make these demonstrations to schools and the conferences, can you talk a little bit about how schools are addressing the issue of equity and access for students that maybe can't have their own devices? What happens in schools? What are you seeing working out there?
And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I had mentioned in the beginning is that COSN actually just released a survey this week, a little bit more specific to the mobile device and the infrastructure side of things. And that is actually one of the biggest concerns across the entire IT educational landscape is what is now being called digital equity. And a lot of times the best access that people are going to have to digital learning tools or even hardware itself is going to be at schools, unfortunately. So it is a very real issue, and that's why I'd also highly recommend everybody read that COSN survey from this week. It's something we can certainly follow up with some additional information and some links for you. But it addresses digital equity as one of the largest problems right now. And what you're seeing is a lot of new programs coming in place. One of the things that I was very interested to learn about is there's a lot of government programs right now that'll actually give you almost subsidies for high-speed internet, and they're now actually rolling mobile devices offerings into that as well, because it's become very evident that, sure, while we're at school, we can have the best network and we can have the best devices in the world, but as soon as we step foot out of there, that entire experience is gone. So I would highly encourage everybody to look into some of the new changes in some of the government programs that are allowing funding to be used for families if they're going to use it specifically for high-speed internet and some types of mobile device programs. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Andrew.
Okay, well, thank you for addressing it. I want to come back briefly to an earlier question from the audience who was talking about antivirus protections, and they just wanted to follow up with another question: was if an infected device were on the network, could it infect other devices and possibly cause networking issues?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly an interesting discussion to be had. There's a lot of potential there. It is possible, especially what's going to be more common is you're going to see links. You're going to see links distributed out through an infected device or anything like that that's going to proliferate through the network. And anybody that clicks on that then is going to be the problem. And again, that's not necessarily specific to the mobile device. It's more specific to the network interaction and the network environment that's been put in place. So, something definitely to be aware of and keep on the radar that, with some mobile device management programs, again, you can protect yourself to an extent, but a lot of that may be beyond the realm of your traditional antivirus that you're used to.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. I also want to come back to, I know you covered it in your presentation, but some members of the audience wanted maybe a little more information about SchoolDude and the Apple's volume purchasing program and its device enrollment program and how those work together. Can you just talk again a little bit about DPP and DEP and how that integrates with your solution?
Absolutely. So they are two separate programs. If you'd like to use the device enrollment program and not the volume purchasing program, not a problem. It's actually probably more common to see people use the volume purchasing program and maybe not the DEP yet. Because typically you're going to want to purchase applications and push them out to your either faculty or to those devices so they can take advantage of some of these digital learning tools. So typically that's the first one I see users look into. Unless you're going with a fully specific or an entirely Apple mobile environment, the DEP may only be so beneficial. But if you're going to be purchasing more of those iPads down the road, it's certainly something to look into. But I think the volume purchasing program is probably the one that I see used most heavily when I'm working with clients. And yeah, they both integrate with our platform as well. So you're able to pull all of your licensing in and also distribute those out as well.
All right. Well, terrific. I think we have pretty much come to the end of our hour, and so we're going to stop there. If you did ask a question that Chris did not have time to answer, someone from SchoolDude will be in contact to get you an answer to that question. So again, that's all the time that we have left today. As we wrap up, I want to thank Chris again for an excellent presentation. And on behalf of eSchool Media, I'd also like to thank SchoolDude for its support today. And one final reminder, we will be sending out an email to everyone who attended today when the recording of the webinar is ready. So thank you all for joining us, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.